Today's topic is about the rise of a controversial figure within the conservative movement. His detractors will say his ideas are full of poison, promoting far-right extremist views like Christian nationalism, white supremacy, misogyny, anti-LGBTQ, opposing multiculturalism, and routinely glorifying authoritarian dictators, but most importantly, anti-Semitism. His advocates, these groypers, would say his ideas circle around America first, promoting things such as prioritizing American prosperity, cultural uniformity, avoiding foreign wars, strict immigration, and Christianity above all. Despite many efforts to cancel, deplatform, debank, and even threaten his life, he has risen above. One thing is for certain, his prominence is on the rise. His imprint on American mainstream politics can no longer be ignored. The real question is this: how did a 27-year-old from the suburbs of Chicago hijack the conservative youth? Today, we cover Nicholas J. Fuentes.
All right. This is the political playbook. I'm Darren. This is my co host Wyatt. And today we're going to talk about the ascent of Nick Fuentes and the civil war that has ensued in the wake of his interview with Tucker Carlson. Nick Fuentes has been on what he has dubbed the generational run, basically where he's been getting a lot of invites to go on podcasts and speak his mind and give his backstory. And this generational run culminated in going on Tucker Carlson's podcast. It wasn't long ago, maybe only 2 weeks, but it feels like an eternity ago. So much has happened. Tucker received a lot of backlash for having him on, and it's caused quite a rift between the pro-Israel and the anti-Israel sides of the right, with pro-Israel sides calling for, or well, not really calling for Tucker's cancellation, but getting mad at Tucker for having platformed Nick Fuentes, and they would say he did not offer a substantial pushback to Nick's ideas. So that's kind of their contention. And then adding fuel to the fire, a guy named Kevin Roberts, which is the president of the Heritage Foundation, which is kind of like the premier conservative think tank in America. The Heritage Foundation has been around. They probably have the most clout. They're the ones behind Project 2025. So I'm sure our viewers, or listeners, I should say, have heard of that. That's who these guys are. And their president and released a video on Twitter, basically defending Tucker Carlson's right to have Nick Fuentes on, and saying that while he abhors some of the things Nick Fuentes says, that he believes Nick should be challenged in debate and not canceled.
Yeah, what a crime.
And
What a crime to say that, huh?
oh yeah, a total crime, according to the Zionists and I guess the broader Jewish lobby. Now, this week, I believe Kevin Roberts has publicly apologized more than 6 times now. He's made many statements. He has said he can't believe what he said. It was so wrong. His friend Yoram Hazony, he runs the NatCon conference. He flew into DC to help Kevin Roberts right his wrongs, or see the light, I suppose. So this guy is totally cooked, and uh, there have been Jewish organizations that have threatened to withdraw support for the Heritage Foundation should he not capitulate to their demands. One of them being that he disavow Tucker Carlson. I believe he did not do so, and therefore these Jewish organizations have withdrawn support thus far. So this very well could be the end of the Heritage Foundation. We will see. We will see. But needless to say, that's kind of the not backup, backstory for this kind of civil war, you could call it, on the right, this ideological war between uh, Zionist right wingers and anti Zionist right wingers.
Darren, you would be better at this than I would because would you openly describe yourself as a groyper?
I would. I would. I'm certainly a follower of his. I listen every day. Uh, I've known about him since 2018, but and while I basically agreed with most everything he said. I wasn't like I was so busy with my life, during college and doing jobs. I didn't have a lot of time to listen to him, but I've had more time in the last few years, and I've really become a super fan, I guess you could say. I've sent super chats in. Yeah, I love the guy.
I
Uh,
gotcha. Well then, so what would you say is like his like core of like what he's trying to do? We'll talk about his goals in just a second, but like what are like his core like beliefs? Like what are like some of the biggest principles of like not just maybe even Nick Fuentes, but like what he would call America first?
I would say what best defines him is he's a Catholic white identitarian and very conservative socially.
Gotcha. And in terms of policy, that would look at like someone who is anti-immigration, anti like foreign aid, foreign wars specifically towards Israel, and then like traditional like conservative like social beliefs. Like no, women are homemakers and he's against gay marriage and all that. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yeah. And let me just say, a lot of people, especially, he gets it from both sides. His detractors really like to misconstrue what he's all about. They'll take clips he's said out of context and extrapolate an entire ideology out of that. He's been called a Nazi. He's been called, he people will claim that his beliefs promote genocide or something. That couldn't be further from the truth. If anything, he's one of the most anti-genocide people I can think of, but we might touch on that later. People who are against him, I would tell people who don't like him, go watch his show, and then you tell me how bad you think he is. Yeah, I don't think he's bad at all.
So
Uh,
in
he,
so in your mind, he would be a troll in those bad clips. And if you actually listen to him when he's being serious and giving a particular like news article like the rigor it deserves, he's actually like pretty level. Like the idea that this he's some far right warmonger extremist trying to kill all non-whites, you would say like that's just like fantasy, right?
oh yeah, that's something totally fabricated, totally concocted by people acting in bad faith. He streams basically 3 hours a night every weekday. So, you take 3 hours, 5 days a week over almost 10 years at this point. You're going to find some bad clips here and there. But
Right. Well, I mean, it's like people forgot what it was like to be 22. You know what I mean? Like, imagine if you had a camera for you in front of your face for 3 hours a day, every weekday for what is he at now? 7 years, 8 years, something like that.
something
Uh,
like that. He
but
started like in 2017, I believe.
I don't want to give him too much of a charitable interpretation here. I mean, you would agree, like, there are some very, very controversial statements, and they aren't all just trolls. Like, some of this, I don't know. Like, I mean, I don't want to play specifics because, like, that's not the point of this conversation. But, like, you would acknowledge that those do exist, where it's like there's no defending what he said, right?
I think there are ones that exist that are certainly controversial, and I totally understand where people take issue with it.
Mm-hmm.
Even when put in context. So even I'm taking away the bad faith element that's really pervasive among his detractors. But I would say that, yeah, I would say everything, even those clips, I find defensible. I don't know that I've seen a clip of his I would necessarily say, oh, that's so beyond the pale to me. But, my moral compass is probably different than a lot of Americans, I would say. I would say, sticks and stones may break my bones, words don't hurt me. It's not, I don't, Nick has never caused for, he's never called, I should not caused, he's never called for anybody's killing. Uh, yeah, he's never issued a threat of violence. He's never cheered on when someone died. So to me, things like this, which are somewhat commonplace these days, and are pretty egregious. He's never done anything like that. So,
Yeah, well, and
yeah.
especially compared to a lot of his detractors. I mean, I thought Tucker Carlson said it best on Megyn Kelly's show.
As far as I know, Nick Fuentes hasn't eaten anyone. You know, I mean, Jeffrey Dahmer ate people, and he was platformed by Diane Sawyer.
Dude, we have a sitting member of Congress. I spoke to the Speaker of the House about this today. We have a sitting member of Congress from Florida called Randy Fine, who was literally texted or put on Twitter, we should kill them all, every single one. Someone texted a picture of a dead baby, and he laughs at it. And it's like, this guy's a lawmaker who's appropriating money to a military committing genocide, and that's cool? It's not cool.
No.
And let's just be honest. That is much worse than anything Nick Fuentes has said.
And that's a modern policy with modern consequences, right? And we're watching it before our eyes. Nick Fuentes has never argued for something that is at that level of evil. Never. I've never seen the clip. I've seen him joke about Hitler. I've seen him joke about Jim Crow water fountains. But I have never heard him seriously say that we should be rounding people up and ethnically cleansing. Never happened.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've never heard anything. And I mean, I would know. I listened to him quite a bit. I haven't heard it if he said it. So, and I've yet to see a clip of it. So I imagine that all the bad faith actors that come at him would certainly have found it if he did, and I haven't seen it. But I guess if I'm going to be charitable, though, to his good faith detractors, I understand why people wouldn't like him, because he does hold incredibly conservative social views that maybe people aren't all for. That's okay, but I think it's all up for debate. You can't just cancel the guy because for example, maybe he's not in favor of interracial marriage. Well, you might find that controversial, but a lot of people don't believe that. Should we just ostracize them from society? I don't think so. I think that's their right to not engage in interracial dating.
Right. Even though, like, I mean, I would personally find that one a little out there and not the best. But let's switch over a little bit. I feel like we've talked about his core beliefs enough. Like, we have a strong sense of who this guy is. Like, he's generally, pro-white, anti-immigration, anti-Israel, and then he loves like traditional conservative, like social stuff, right? So let's talk about like his goal with these beliefs. So like, what would you say his goal is with, say, the Groypers, or like what he's trying to promote? Like, why is he doing this, basically?
Basically, he wants to get a critical mass of like-minded, young, hopefully, but anyone, critical mass of like-minded individuals to infiltrate the GOP. And once they've taken control of the institutions, or have enough people within the institutions, they're going to activate, so to speak, and enact their will. So, and largely he's been successful. I'm sure you've seen the New York Times pieces, and one of them, they quoted an anonymous source that claimed perhaps 30 to 40% of all GOP staffers are followers of Nick Fuentes, groypers.
Well, and that statistic would completely destroy the fact. So, like, there are people on the left, like Kyle Kalinske and Hassan Piker specifically, who think that this is an extremely online thing and it's only like incels in their basements or whatnot. If it's true, and this New York Times article, it's not like they probably just made this up, right? I mean, this number is coming from some kind of interaction they've had or conversation they've had with GOP staffers. So if that number is even close to true, then this is not an online movement. This is a movement that's going to have consequences, and like you said, it's particularly targeted at the youth. So
Oh,
as
yeah.
you know, these are staffers for White House people. These are researchers for congressmen. These are state and local officials, probably at some level. I mean,
Oh, certainly.
this
And
this does
just
not just end here, right? Like this is at the beginning of the movement. Like this is in a very infant stage.
oh yeah. Well, if you recall, and we covered this, the Politico hit job on this young Republicans group chat. All those texts
Hmm.
got leaked. And those guys weren't even necessarily groypers. They may be groyper adjacent in their ideology. I'm not sure, but uh, Nick said on his show he didn't know them. I mean, not that he knows everyone who considers himself a groyper. I mean, he has millions of followers, but still.
Right, and
Uh,
this is going to mean that institutions such as, for example, TPUSA, the RNC, any like large think tanks, if they get infiltrated with these groypers, right, then we can almost assume that these organizations are going to be pushed further to the right on issues like we mentioned above, anti-war, U.S.-Israel relations, immigration, shit like that. So, I mean, do you think that they're going to be successful? Are they successful, or is this going to like fizzle out?
I think largely they've been successful in a few ways, and let me tell you how. So Charlie Kirk, before he died, uh, I would consider him a moderate Republican, but I noticed throughout the years, especially after the first Groyper War, and that's kind of where Nick's followers would show up at TPUSA events and ask Charlie Kirk his stance on Israel or gay marriage. Charlie Kirk used to do events with a gay black guy. Charlie Kirk had become Groyper adjacent in a lot of his views. He never went anti Israel, but by the time he died, he was decidedly pro-white. I recall seeing many clips from him that are anti-DEI and pretty transgressive even, and even some things that yeah, I mean, yeah, basically further right wing, and that in fact that gay black guy, which I believe his name is like Rob something, Rob Smith maybe. I believe he had basically become incredibly disillusioned with the conservative movement because it had moved so far right in his view, so socially conservative. So, in many ways, not only was Charlie Kirk absorbing these ideas and energies, so was the establishment. I mean, you can look at I mean, really all of the popular pundits, Matt Walsh, very pro-white, pretty transgressive, all these guys. The country has just moved very far right, and that's in no small part due to Nick. However, the people with the money may not necessarily hold his far right views, nor and especially not his views on Israel. So I don't think they certainly don't have institutional power yet. Otherwise, the Jewish lobby wouldn't be smacking down heritage like it is, the Heritage Foundation, that is.
Yeah,
That
absolutely. I mean, and there's no doubt that Nick has been on the vanguard for the far right, trying to do this. I mean, like you said, you mentioned Charlie Kirk, Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh. We have watched them before our eyes embrace America First policies without even explicitly naming it. Like, I mean, I'm sure as you know, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, I'm sure even Charlie Kirk wouldn't like to admit it. They did not endorse Trump as their first choice in 2016. They, became more and more further right as, these policies became ever more popular with the base. So I think that that is undeniable to see. And I think that it's even more true that Nick is part of that reason.
in no small part, I think it's really all because of Nick and his followers, which are all incredibly zealous and really push the conversation further right. It wouldn't have happened without him, I don't believe, because the other far right movement that Nick was kind of born out of, like the alt right movement,
Hmm.
uh, that had basically fizzled out by the end of 2017. It was no more. Richard Spencer is no longer as famous as he once was. Yeah, I mean, it the alt right doesn't really exist anymore.
Right.
So this is where all the far
Well,
right energy is, the
and
groypers.
and the reason for that, like the reason Richard Spencer and his acolytes like fizzled out is because they never got to achieve that institutional power. So, if it's okay with you, I'll switch on to this next one, which is a part of this MAGA civil war that we see going on. The lack of institutional power they currently have, and then where you see that going in the future, whether it's 2028 or even like we'll get to Trump in a second, I promise. But let's leave him out of this for now. But specifically, just like you know, where does Nick stand amongst the institutional people right now, and what does he have to do to win?
Yeah, it's a weird thing because all the people basically or well, I shouldn't say all, but the people are growingly anti-Israel, anti-woke, pro-white, or just, they're not going to be just consumed by white guilt like they were in the past. So the people, in a way, are on Nick's side, even though many of them wouldn't go as far as him. But the institutions are totally arrayed against him. We'll see how it plays out. I think these past couple of weeks they may have been a preview of what's to come. Perhaps there will be some kind of like Israel loyalty test or something instituted, and all these organizations to weed out anti Semites. I believe the Heritage Foundation is going to start hosting weekly Shabbat dinners. So, you can imagine whoever opts out of attending these Shabbat dinners is likely going to be put on a list, and maybe they don't get a promotion, and maybe they're just gone. So I think there will perhaps be soft forms of cancellation done like that in order to try and suppress Nick's followers, so they don't rise through the ranks of these organizations, even if they can't perfectly sniff them out. uh, so I think that's how the establishment is going to fight back and try to like keep in their mind like the barbarians at bay.
So you do think that this all kind of revolves around Zionism, right? So You think that like if it wasn't for Fuentes's view on Zionism, there would be no real need to police him as much or deplatform him or debank him, right? You think that this all stems around like he crossed the third rail of Republican politics, and now they are going to do everything. They are going to throw every resource to police this and keep this contained before it spreads into institutional power. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and I can prove it. Just go watch a couple episodes of Matt Walsh's show, or even the stuff Charlie Kirk was doing before his death. They're all, I mean, they're incredibly transgressive. Anti. Well, I shouldn't say anti-black, but they'll, they'll certainly make criticisms about black people. Matt Walsh will really go in on the transgenders. I believe, I don't know if it was Walsh or Knowles, but one of them said something like we must destroy transgenderism, but the way he said it, uh
Eradicate. That was the word. It was
yeah,
Michael
eradicate.
Knowles. Right.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, I think the left was being a little hysterical when they were saying, oh my gosh, this is like calling for the genocide of transsexual people. But if I'm being totally charitable, I mean, you could interpret it that way, I suppose. So they can be incredibly edgy, like Nick is. Nick is very edgy. Although I don't think it's funny. Nick really doesn't even beat on transgenders like that. I mean, he spares them a lot of vitriol. But needless to say, the one thing that Matt Walsh and Kirk and Knowles and all these guys don't go in on super hard is Israel. That's the one issue they won't go hard on. So it's obvious where the dividing line is. It's like you have to be good on that one issue, and I can guarantee, if Nick was pro-Israel, with how charismatic he is and how many people he gets to mobilize, yeah, how many people he's mobilized, that would be Israel's greatest asset, and they would be totally fine with every little thing he said, as long as it wasn't anti-Israel, anti-Jewish.
Well, there would definitely be a lot more zeros in his bank account. I can tell you that right now. There's no question he'd be getting that $7,000 a month. No doubt about it if he could. But while we're on this, I just want to clear something up too because I see a lot of this on the left, and I just kind of want to police a little bit. They seem to think that Nick Fuentes, or not all of them, but some of them definitely think that this is just like a total grift. He doesn't believe a word he's saying, and he's just doing this to make money. Um, why don't you just go ahead and take a second to debunk that? Because a lot of these people probably are not aware. Like, he was not only deplatformed, he was debanked. He was unable to have like relationships with financial institutions. He could not do a direct deposit. He could not do a wire transfer. So like, there's no money here. I mean, and if you're talking about like he wanted to do something just for money, like obviously, why wouldn't he just do that for the other side and double his income, right?
You made just such an excellent point. I'll just bolster it. I mean, like you said, if he was a grifter, he'd be a pro-Israel guy because the Israelis, Zionists, they're losing the youth. Nobody on the left is a Zionist, and increasingly, people on the right are being disillusioned with Israel and the Jewish lobby. So, I mean, if Nick wanted to, he could be their greatest asset, and they would love him. And yeah, he'd have all the money in the world. So, the very fact that he's chosen this path of most resistance should dispel any notion that he's a grifter. I mean, like you said, bank account frozen, I believe it was frozen for around half a year before he got his money back. And at that time, he, maybe this is a little thing, but it probably felt big to him at the time. I mean, he couldn't pay his loans. So, he has a house, can't pay his mortgage. Well, his credit rating drops. It was a time of a lot of struggle for him. He still doesn't have credit card processing. He sells like hats online, and you have to buy them with like Bitcoin and stuff. So it's like if he was a grifter, I don't think he would have chosen the path where he can't have credit card processing. So that's just absurd, and I think it just that's another one of these totally dismissive, totally bad faith attacks on him. Calling him a grifter. He certainly believes what he's saying.
You talked about it a second ago earlier too, how Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles, they never touch that third rail, right? And but they can pick out all the low-hanging fruit they want, whether that is minority groups, illegals, transgender people, gay people. I mean, it's pretty easy to pick on them if you're a mainstream conservative, and you're not going to get too much flack at this current standpoint.
Oh
But
yeah.
one thing, and another thing I would just like to add to that, I think actual anti-Semitism is more acceptable than you might think. I mean, Ben Shapiro has that famous tweet where and it'll come to me later. I don't remember who it is, but they said something that was like genuinely anti-Semitic. Like you would not want this repeated about you. And Ben Shapiro said, well, a bunch of people are giving them crap, but they undyingly support Israel, so I don't really care. Which I think goes to tell me that it's not really anti Semitism that is really a problem, it's anti Zionism. And anti Semitism is really just their sword and shield that they use as a weapon against people that they find particularly vulgar, right? Or a threat to Zionism, let's say. I mean, does that seem fair? Or do you disagree? Do you think that anti-Semitism is also not acceptable?
Well, I totally agree that anti-Semitism is just a word that's used as a cudgel to basically, if you're being called an anti-Semite, that means you're not supporting the state of Israel, or in some way are trying to keep Zionists from getting what they want. So,
Well, and the chief architect for what I described was also Candace Owens too. Like Candace Owens in my mind, like could be categorized as anti-Semitic, and Ben Shapiro hired her, platformed her, drove her engagement before, and then the only time where he was like, okay, we gotta let this girl go is whenever she started to buck the train on Israel as a state. That is where the real rubber meets the road here. Like I think it is possible for you to be a right winger who might be genuinely anti-Semitic as long as you're a Zionist, which I know may sound contradictory, but it's really not.
yeah, you might be able to reconcile those things. Well, let me give you an example. So, not that Trump is like an anti-Semite. Some left wingers will sometimes try to claim that he's actually an anti-Semite because of X reason or whatever, and I think it's a little ridiculous. But Trump said something this year like he called somebody a Shylock, which Shylock is like a character from a Shakespeare play. I forget which one. I'm that's kind of like a gap in my education, but Shylock is a Jewish character who's like a bad guy, and so basically Shylock is like a slur for Jewish people. And the Jews said at the time, oh, well, Trump just bombed Iran, so I've got no problem with him calling people Shylocks.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
so basically, like, you know, just as, like, I don't know, black people police the use of the N word, Jews would probably call slurs such as that anti-Semitic. But if as long as they're with the program on the state of Israel, they're not going to police them on that. They're not going to call them out for that. Not that they should. I mean, he's just a boomer. He's going to say some word that's inappropriate, but, you know, you see my point. I mean,
Yeah,
it's all
no, I
very
gotcha.
selective.
Okay, Darren. Nick Fuentes has received denouncement from Ben Shapiro and even elected officials such as Dan Crenshaw, Ted Cruz, and Lindsey Graham. My question is, why has the establishment neocons failed to exile him from their movement?
Basically, because they're unlikable. They have no good answers for why you should support Israel. You know, this total pariah state that everybody is, every elected official, I should say, is just hell bent on supporting and funding, even when it makes us look terrible and causes strain in international relations. And basically, they have no way to refute Nick. And instead of trying to debate him, they just opt for this like platforming thing. They try to cancel him. They try to, or they just refuse to engage with his ideas or, debate him because they know they would lose because what they support is indefensible. Really, from an America First perspective.
Just as a follow-up question, what would you say to somebody who said, well, Darren, we can't platform him. It's not because we're afraid that our arguments won't hold water. We can't platform him because to platform him would be to give him a larger voice and a larger audience. What would you say to that?
I would say that's silly. And this is something that Nick says. Nick has a platform and he has an audience. He's on Rumble. And before he was on Rumble, he had his own website and he gets a lot of viewers. He's one of the biggest political streamers in the entire world.
So you would say that that's just copium. That's all that is, or a scapegoat, something like that.
That's cope. Yeah, they're just afraid to debate him. But what say you on this question? What say you?
If I was a right winger and I wanted a particular person exiled from the movement, I would move to have them deplatformed. I would do everything I could because here's the thing, like if you platform a guy like Nick, and I'm not saying I agree with it, I'm saying like hypothetically, if I wanted somebody else exiled, not Nick, okay, um, then I would absolutely have them deplatformed because I think by engaging with them and you let them grow an audience, then you're almost like letting a genie out of the bottle. Now, at this point, like currently, where Nick is at, you have to engage because Nick is so big now. I mean, Tucker Carlson said it best on a podcast with Dave Smith. I'm not sure that he was platforming Nick Fuentes. It might have been the other way around where Nick was platforming Tucker. Which, I'm sure is a little exaggerated, but you get the idea. The idea is that Nick is just as big as some of these commentators. So after they platformed Nick Fuentes on the Tucker Carlson show, Ben Shapiro went out to condemn Carlson for platforming him, giving him a soft interview to Fuentes. He actually did his own show about this without ad reads, and then he went on Megyn Kelly's show, he went on the Trigonometry show, and he's probably going to go on Dave Rubin's podcast to denounce Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson for an hour apiece. So, is this a genuine ideological split for Ben Shapiro, or do you think that this is just like a personal rivalry between him and Tucker?
It's certainly both, but largely like 95%, it's like the ideological split. Tucker and him definitely have beef. They've had beef over the years. I've seen clips of them not getting along. Ultimately, he really just doesn't like that Tucker platformed Nick and basically gave a megaphone to Nick, because Nick, I think Ben Shapiro perceives Nick to be like one of the biggest threats to his ideological project, which is, Likudnik Zionism, basically.
Figures on the right, such as Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, even J.D. Vance, have tried to abstain as much as they can from this ideological civil war. I just wanted to know, given their identity as Catholics and, America First conservatives, why do you think that they've stayed so quiet on this issue?
Uh, well, in the case of well, for all of them, I think they all know that the pro-Israel position is pretty indefensible, nonsensical from an America First perspective. There's just no rhyme or reason to align with a pariah state and give them all this money and spend all this money defending them. Uh, you know, it's obviously because of, donors and such. So they just don't have the courage of their convictions to take a stand and potentially get fired, like in the case of Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles. I mean, obviously, if they came out tonight and said something like, I'm against Jewish infiltration of the institutions, or something like that, or Zionist control of the government is probably the better wording. If they said something like that, they would be fired the next day. And then if JD Vance, someone who's also a fence sitter in many ways, if he said something very anti-Zionist, then he wouldn't have any donor money for 2028. All the money would go to the guy that would toe the Zionist line. So,
By that you mean Rubio. Um,
yeah, yeah.
I think I know your answer to this one. So you view this, or do you view this more as political calculus or genuine indifference on the issue?
Oh, I think it's certainly political calculus. Tim Dillon, that comedian, he had a funny clip where I guess he was going to get paid to go to Saudi Arabia and do a comedy show. He said, "Yeah, I don't support a lot of what the government of Saudi Arabia does, but they're going to pay me enough so that I don't care." And I think that's basically where Matt Walsh is. Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh. I think if you really asked them and they knew there wouldn't be any repercussions, they would probably admit that support for the state of Israel is basically indefensible, but they're getting paid enough, and they do get paid a lot, and they like their jobs enough that it's really just not worth uh, going hard on the issue. And, if I'm being charitable, maybe they really don't think what Israel has been doing or has done for so many years is that bad, or that defending them isn't that bad. But I think that, you know, if you really got down to what they really believed, I think they'd be against it. But what do you think though on this one though? Do you
No, I
think?
think I think you hit it on the head. Like I think that they're just like, okay, don't poke the bear here. Just don't just stay away and everything will be fine. Like this can only hurt you is probably their calculus. If you touch this issue, this is plutonium for your career, for your livelihood, everything. This is game over.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, just take what's happened with the Heritage Foundation guy, and you probably understand their reasoning. I mean,
Well, I mean, here's the fact too. Not everyone can be Candace Owens, where they have a buck with the Daily Wire over this, and then they make their entire political identity off of it. That can't happen very often. So, or that at least can't happen every single time. For them, I'm sure it's just a stability versus the unknown question on like whether they want to. Plus, I'm sure they don't really care. So.
oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Well, either way, they're getting paid enough to not care.
Nick Fuentes openly calls for a pro-white Christian nation and is committed to combating all factions within the right opposed towards this goal. Do you personally support this, and is this identity politics compatible with traditional American values of the melting pot and freedom of religion?
Oh yeah, I do support it. I consider myself very pro-white. I don't say that, and this is what Nick would say as well. That doesn't mean I hate any other race or want to see harm uh, fall upon any other race, but that just means I don't want bad things to happen to whites, and I want whites to be enriched, I guess, enfranchised. Is it compatible with American values? Absolutely. I mean, if anything, the founders were far more, I guess, far right by today's standards than Nick is. Nick doesn't advocate for slavery or a two-tiered justice system or anything like that. So, yeah, I mean, I think what Nick advocates for is not, most of it is not that extreme, and yeah, I don't think there's any I don't think there's any contradiction with what he believes and what uh, American values are. He believes in liberty, liberty, I think, but I guess we all do have different conceptions of liberty. If your conception of liberty is gay marriage or something, then maybe you won't find him to be all that liberal. But I don't think he's out here to exclude anyone based off of uh, you know immutable characteristics, I should say.
Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA's targeted demographic was largely young American men. Obviously, after Charlie Kirk's assassination, there was a void due to the death of the thought leader of many young Americans. Do you think that void left by Kirk is going to accelerate the Groypers movement in America?
I think it will accelerate it. I don't know that. I mean, obviously, there is overlap between Kirk fans and Nick fans, and there's overlap between Kirk fans and Shapiro fans. I don't know the ratio. I don't know if I could give you a perfect breakdown, but Nick probably will absorb a lot of those people, and I'm sure he already has absorbed some. I watch him fairly regularly, and I can watch his follower count go up every day. It's been steadily increasing, but uh, I don't know that I saw just a huge surge or anything in the wake of Charlie's death. So while I am sure he probably has absorbed some of Charlie's fans, it's not clear to me who's going to absorb the most. I mean, there's a lot of lanes they could go to. They could go to Candace. They could go to Matt Walsh, Shapiro. There's a bunch of people. So, um, yeah, I don't know where all the followers of Kirk will go necessarily. I'm not quite sure yet.
Well, he's got stiff competition between Jack Posobiec and Ben Shapiro. So, um,
That is a
hey,
good point. He's the most
Dave,
talented of all the people I've
Dave
listed.
Rubin may get all of them. We don't know yet. So, given the mountain of controversial clips of Nick, right, and there is a bunch. What would be your response to the accusation that Nick Fuentes is just rebranded white nationalism?
Well, I would say he's something like a white nationalist. I think he's described himself more so, though, as a white identitarian or a white majoritarian, perhaps. And basically, what that means is he's pro-white. He doesn't want uh, anti-white policies enacted. But he's not necessarily an exclusionist. That's where you might, you know, it's one of those things. These definitions are not perfectly set in stone. So you could probably call him a white nationalist in that he's an American nationalist and he's pro white, but he's not really an exclusionist like there are many minorities in his movement, and he makes them fairly visible sometimes, although mostly for humorous reasons. But I don't think he harbors any genuine racial hatred, and he will say so on his show. I mean, after all, one of his good friends is Kanye West, so uh, you know, I don't think he's going to go and deport all the black population to Liberia or something. You know, so I just think he wants to increase the white share of the population. He doesn't want it to become a white minority nation, but he doesn't want to necessarily he doesn't want to like ethnically cleanse or anything. So he's not just going to deport all non-whites.
So Trump has yet to issue a full statement in support or condemnation of Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson during their interview. Do you think that the president should take a side, or do you think he should continue to abstain or risk fracturing the MAGA movement?
Well, what I really want is for him to take the side of Tucker and Nick, but I do know that that's probably not going to happen. So I would prefer that, with the two likely scenarios being Trump abstaining from opining and or just outright supporting the side of Shapiro and Mark Levin. I would prefer that Trump say nothing, being that those are the two most likely scenarios. But yeah, Trump is pretty Zionist himself, so I don't see him coming to the support of Nick anytime soon. Tucker is a friend of his, though, but I think Tucker has kind of been a little on the outs after he uh, earlier this year. I think he gave mild criticism of Trump, and I think that was a bridge too far for.
About Iran,
Uh,
correct? Is that what you're referring to?
I believe so. I think that was the issue, and that was a bit much for the orange egomaniac. So,
Absolutely. This one I will comment and answer on. I do think that the president should take a side. I think it is for MAGA to fully understand from the top which way that they think that they should go. So it'll help, crown a new king in the Civil War. So,
oh yeah.
last question for you. Looking forward to 2028, the MAGA coalition could go a few different directions. So, is Nick Fuentes' America First a temporary disruptor for the GOP, or is it the future that will have to eventually be baked into Republican policy?
I think it's the future. I really do. I don't. I think the genie is out of the bottle, uh, especially on the Israel stuff. And I've got to say, the pro Zionist side, or I guess just the Zionist side, they do not understand PR. I mean, all they understand is like lecturing and, getting on finger wagging. And I think the American people are sick of it. You probably saw clips of Ben Shapiro's appearance on Megyn Kelly in the wake of all this controversy. Yeah, I mean, he was basically getting on to her. Like, how dare she, uh, even offer mild pushback to him. So, yeah, it's one of these things. I think the public is just getting sick of this Zionist nonsense, and and the youth, they all follow Nick. So, the Israel is in dire straits.
Absolutely. Well, if you want to go ahead, I'm your witness.
All righty. So I have some questions for you, seeing that you're more of the left wing persuasion, and these are kind of things I'd been thinking of in the past. And I also saw a commentator that I like, Richard Spencer. He brought this up, and yeah, I just think it's a good question to ask. So, there are many left wingers who claim to be pro Palestine. They want Palestinian liberation. But then they try to, they actively try to suppress and cancel Nick Fuentes, even, ostensibly pro free speech left wingers such as Crystal Ball. On Breaking Points, she straight up admitted that she's okay with canceling Nick Fuentes. So, not very principled there. And basically, they want to suppress people like him, even though he's played a huge role, probably the biggest role, in turning the right wing youth into anti Zionists. If it weren't for Nick, maybe the biggest dissident right, I guess you could call them, media figures would be subversives like Bronze Age Pervert, who is a Zionist. So let me ask you this: should the left embrace Fuentes for the sake of Palestinian liberation? What do you think?
So I think that the left should embrace Nick where he's right. In this case, Palestinian liberation, or honestly, not even just that. Like anytime you've heard Nick Fuentes talk about people in need or like those who like desperately need help, he's a very humanitarian in that aspect, which I think would shock a lot of people. Actually, like he has a deep respect for human dignity and the respect of people. So I think that that would shock a lot of lefties, to be honest with you. But in terms of endorsing everything he says, I don't think you have to endorse everything he says. And I'll tell you right now, a bunch of left wingers, they are afraid of endorsing or saying that they agree with Fuentes about this, because of where they think it'll lead people. They're afraid they'll make a wrong turn at Albuquerque and I mean, I'm thinking back to the Fuentes and Tucker Carlson interview. There was a moment in there where they talked about David Duke.
And he's discredited. He's doing the David Duke. Like David Duke would always, every time I rolled out a new show, he would issue an endorsement of the show. I've never met the guy. What's that? Well, it's the feds. Obviously, he's trying to destroy me by association. Whatever. You see the point?
So, like, and Kyle Kalinske said that today on his show, that Nick Fuentes is kind of ruining the game a little bit for the left because, like, this is an issue that the left wants moral clarity on, and the youth want moral clarity on, and Nick is on the right side of that. I think where the left is worried and where I'm worried is that they're going to go a little too far if they follow Fuentes, to where it's not just the Israeli government we have a problem with. It's what would Nick Fuentes, how would he phrase it? Organized Jewry, or which I do not support. I do not want people to have that takeaway as a left winger. I don't have a problem with condemning that. I have a problem with I have no problem condemning the Israeli government, but Jews as a whole.
Yeah, I would, argue in favor of Nick. It's one of these things. It's like obviously not all. He would argue more so the majority. He uses the Jew, the term the Jews just more. I guess he's not so guarded about it. I mean, like 90% of Jews are like Zionists, but
I would just say that like my position on this is that like Christian Zionists are a much bigger faction to be worried about because there's just more of them. I mean, Jews are like what, 2% of the population? Like, even if every single one of them are hardcore Zionists, that's nothing compared to like Southern evangelical Zionists.
Yeah, the Christians certainly have the numbers. They don't have the institutional power, though, I would say, would probably be where Nick would draw the line. But onto my this isn't a question kind of in the same vein, but I did want to hit on it in case you thought of any particular people that maybe fit this description, or just your thoughts on it in general. Do you think the left wing or certain left wingers are even serious about Palestinian liberation if they seek to suppress voices like Fuentes? Because as I see it, he's basically turned the entire right-wing youth against Israel. So what could possibly be the calculus for canceling him if they truly believe a genocide is going on, even if it's, kind of halted right now, where there's currently a ceasefire that Israel is breaking every day. But, I would call it a genocide. So are they serious? Or do they need to change their tactics?
So I think to say that the left is not serious about, Palestinian liberation or humanitarian politics, I think is just to miss the mark. I mean, the left at their core is the pro-Palestinian portion of American politics. I mean, that's just, and their concerns with Fuentes and his, like you said, like Crystal Ball, for example, like her concern is that like, look, we can agree on this with Nick Fuentes, but it's almost like a broken clock thing. So we're not going to risk, the integrity of the movement if that means that we have to like, carry the baggage of all the other stuff that they disagree with. And look, I may not necessarily agree with that. I think that politics is all about coalition building and you need all the votes and all the allies you can get. I wouldn't turn anybody away for anything. But that doesn't change the fact that not everyone thinks like that, especially people who are in the business of almost like purity testing.
It probably does ultimately boil down to that purity testing feature of the left, which isn't quite as prevalent among the right. Yeah, that's a bit of a polemical question I just asked. Like, are you even serious about Palestinian liberation? I think, they probably do want what's best for Palestine, but I don't know. It almost makes me
like who do you not to follow up, I know I'm your witness, but like who do you think, like if we were to poll all the groypers and poll all the lefties, do you think that the groypers care more about Palestine or do you care more about being anti-Israel in terms of like foreign aid and military assistance? I feel like that's almost rhetorical, right?
Yeah, because groypers, while they probably do care for the Palestinians on some level, that's not what they emphasize. They emphasize strategic, smart foreign policy.
Decoupling, right?
Yeah.
From right. No, and I understand that. And honestly, like I would, if I was to be charitable to these other people, I don't know. That's what I would say that their calculation is that like, does Fuentes even really care, or does he just like using this as like a mechanism to argue against or argue for the decoupling? Which, I actually think that Nick Fuentes seems to care about the genocide. But I definitely am a lone voice there on the left.
A lot of left wingers are completely comfortable fraternizing with and, platforming, so to speak, right wing and left wing Zionists. People that come to mind are like Bill Maher, pretty much any pundit on any major outlet. So people on NBC, I guess Kristen Welker, I guess you could say, uh, anyone mainstream is totally fine with platforming Zionists, and Zionism is. I mean, we've seen it before our eyes. It's undoubtedly an ideology that promotes genocide. So why do you think it is? Uh, and this is actually kind of a broad question, I guess, but why do you think the line for left wingers and right wingers, for that matter, I guess, is drawn at Fuentes? Like, why is supporting an active genocide okay, but making edgy jokes about racial minorities and I guess the Holocaust. Why is that a bridge too far?
Well, so I think despite his moral clarity on the genocide, right? I think that a bunch of people on the left, they think that his motivations are coming from a very anti-Semitic place, and they don't view that amongst themselves. So it's almost like they think that he goes a step past the truth and ends up at a totally wrong spot, where he ends up blaming, all Jews and not just the Israeli government. But in terms of like why they are willing to accept, like Bill Maher is the perfect example, honestly, where it's like he's almost pro this genocide and supporting, and they supported Biden, and Biden supported this genocide longer than the Trump administration did, and that wasn't disqualifying for Kamala, right? Um,
Very true.
I think that the reason for that is because they're looking at, I mean, and this is to be charitable. They're looking at this in totality. They think that if they accept Nick Fuentes' ideology, it'll come in the form of fascism, which they feel like they can't trust. So, like, yes, he might be right here, but he's wrong basically everywhere else. Is the best way to describe that.
I think maybe comes from being perhaps unfamiliar with Nick's content. I for all these people that say, "Oh, he blames all Jews," I'm like, "Well, how many episodes of America First have you listened to?" You know, because if you did, I think you would come away from watching, even just maybe 2 episodes, you would come away from it not knowing that this is not a guy that is out to hurt anyone. This is a purely political movement. But figures like Kyle Kalinske, for example, think that Nick is an unwitting force for good for the left because he believes Nick will divide the right wing and might even destroy it in a way. And I guess to be charitable to Kyle, you could kind of see that happen these past 2 weeks. I mean, the Heritage Foundation may be destroyed over their president making one, 2-minute long video about Nick. So is Kyle correct? Will Groyperism destroy the party, or will it become the party?
So I think that this answer totally depends on your timeline because, Nick, his target demographic that he has is the younger Republican, and I will say specifically men. There are Groypettes, right? But
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, it's mostly like a male coded demographic. And in my opinion, he's increasingly going to become more popular. That's just the way I view it. But this ideology could potentially blow up the current GOP coalition. But this is the thing about politics is that these coalitions they're built and rebuilt over time. So, for example, like the Obama coalition is not the same coalition that even Biden or Harris had, right? It's a totally different makeup, and it's going to be the same for the Republicans as well, um, particularly among the youth. I mean, sorry, dry mouth. The young Americans are going to look at these first 2 years and they're going to decide in the midterms, like, okay, are we satisfied with this? Did we go to war with Iran? Have we delivered on the deportations? Nope, 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 nope. Well, and that's not even to say, Darren, that they will vote Democrat, right? Out of spite. They may just abstain from voting, and that's enough, right? Because believe it or not voting actually is practically a vote because
Yeah.
you're basically withdrawing a vote that the right used to be able to count on. So I don't think Kyle is right in the sense that this will blow up the movement. I think this will change the way that they're going to have to build a coalition. But as for his speculation about him being like a negative force for the GOP, I mean, I just have to tell like Kyle Kalinske and like Hassan, like all the lefties of the internet, like just be careful what you wish for because like you said it best. Charlie Kirk is the moderate one, believe it or not, and Fuentes can be a disruptor, but he could also be the worst thing you could possibly imagine if he decides to win. So just be careful.
Hmm. Very good. Well said. Well, that's all I have in terms of my questions. Do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, and I just wanted to end on this because I didn't say it earlier. I think part of the reason that the right has been so ineffective of policing Nick has a lot to do with like post October 7th messaging. Because, I mean, like you said, this is an objective genocide. I mean, you have Israeli officials arguing openly for ethnic cleansing, for open genocide of little children, Christian, Muslim, women, whatever, right? They just want the entire land purged of Palestinian blood. And you have American politicians who are very eager to vote for it. and they don't even have the shame to hide that they're voting for a genocide. Like Randy Fine is openly showing pictures of dead Palestinian children and laughing about it. So there is a lack of moral compass right now on the establishment side that has let people think that Nick Fuentes is somehow morally superior on this issue than them. And it's given him a level of credibility I don't think he had before, right? I mean, and I'm not saying that he had no audience before October 7th. I'm just saying that his audience, like two things have made Nick Fuentes possible. It's getting him back on Twitter, getting him on Rumble, and the post October 7th messaging.
No,
I don't
I
know.
think you're totally right. I think letting his voice be heard on Rumble and X, those were huge. But October 7th, people had all these questions. Well, why does our government allow this? And Nick has the answers. So when nobody else can really provide a clear, concise message as to why it's happening, I think, Nick is where they'll flock. So, yeah, I think you're 100% right.
Yeah, and it's definitely like one of the bigger issues for the youth as well, because it's just such an obvious wrong for them. Like I know our boomers went through so much propaganda that they can't help but oversee it. They just they will not overcome. We just have to wait for them to die out basically before and but with the youth, there was definitely potential here to change minds and propagandize them. And we had a guy like Nick or, Hassan Piker or, many people on the left. It's definitely a left coded issue. I think the genocide. But Nick is or was one of the lone voices, and he's definitely multiplied his ability to message here.
Where we personally, I guess, differ from Fuentes and offer our, I guess, criticisms, if we have any of him, I'll go first because I think my criticism of him will be more paltry. I don't have much to criticize him on, but I guess if I would offer one criticism of him, he can be a bit belligerent, it seems, in his interpersonal relationships. And I think that might just be a byproduct of being a, very headstrong person. So it's probably a quality you want in a good leader. But like there was a recent falling out between him and this guy named Eric Arval. And Eric Arval is another, well, he's a little different than Nick, but he's like a white nationalist, but he set up like a rural, like whites only community in Arkansas. And I think he took one of Nick's clips out of context and DM'd him and said, "Hey, can you expound on that?" Or and Nick kind of viewed it kind of as a bad faith attack, and then he said, Arval is dead to him. So I think Nick has a lot of passion, but sometimes I think maybe he, and I can't know for sure, but he might tend to crash out a bit much so in his interpersonal relationship. So if there's any criticism I have, it would probably be that. But then again, it might just be a byproduct of being a strong, headstrong leader. So maybe it's something I shouldn't even worry about. But how about you? What, I know you probably have far more criticisms of him than I.
Yeah, and I'm gonna ignore the low hanging fruit, which is all the bad controversial clips about praising Hitler and all of that, which I do think are bad, which is very brave to say, evidently. But I think the big things, this is where it's the most important to me, is I think that he gets wrong the issue of immigration a little bit. I think he's deeply misguided on a lot. I think honestly, like America has always been open to the foreigner, to the ethnic, to the as best we can. We haven't been perfect, and they haven't always been treated great, right? But that we've always allowed them in, and we've always said like, "Come on, be a part of the opportunity that's going on." And I definitely am not saying that that's not always a good thing, but I think he's generally wrong that like we should have cut off complete immigration because immigrants are who built this country. Immigrants are who expanded westward. Immigrants are who did everything that made this country great. That's just a fact. The other two big things, I don't think he's a firm believer in democracy. I think that democracy to him is more of a tool to achieve his political ends. I think he would switch to other forms of authoritarianism as soon as he could, to be honest with you. I think what he did on January 6th was inexcusable. Like he was part of the big lie. He obviously did not promote violence. Otherwise he would have been in prison, but he still, promoted the lie, right? I don't think that there's really any denying that. And then the last thing, and this is the thing that I think makes the most sense for Nick, is the lack of respect for institutions. Like he has zero respect, I think, for things like the CIA or universities or shit like that. It's hard to argue against that because, I mean, Nick has been a victim of these institutions wrongfully exercising their power. So I'll give him a little bit of charity there. But the first two, I'm like, and of course, with all the bad clips I'd mentioned.
The one that probably resonates with me the most of your criticisms of him would probably be the election denial stuff. I don't find I don't find the evidence for it very compelling. Yeah, but I do think he sincerely believes that the election was stolen from Trump.
Oh, see, I don't. Like, this is the one area I think he's too smart to believe that. And not just him, I think everyone mostly who thinks that the election was stolen, I think that they are lying to them and to their audience.
I think he sincere. No, I think he sincerely believes, but I think this is just one of the things he gets wrong because he is kind of conspiratorially minded. So I
Can you
could see
blame him?
him.
Can you blame him?
Yeah, I don't blame him, but for having that proclivity about himself. But yeah, that's the one thing I'm like, I totally understand his skepticism of the institutions, but yeah, I just don't find the election
Well, that
denialism
that
stuff
one to
compelling.
me, it's almost worse if he does truly believe it because that's just a lack of discernment. Like that. I mean, that was obviously not true. And I could tell it broke his heart a little bit when Trump, he didn't mean to admit it, but he was like, I mean, it wasn't really stolen, right? I mean, Nick was very beat up about that, right? Because he was like, people went to jail over that, like people lost their lives over that. Um,
Oh yeah, I remember that. It was kind of around the election. It was a little bit before the election, and I don't know if Trump just kind of had a slip and basically said,
a
uh,
Freudian one.
yeah, it was like we something like along the lines of, oh yeah, we lost the last one or something like that. Something along those. I can't remember the exact one, but Nick went on this pretty good tirade, and he was like, well, what was it all for? If it and Nick faced a lot of consequences for having been at the Capitol. He didn't storm the building or anything, but he was there, and as a result, that's kind of went around the time the bank accounts were frozen. That's kind of around the time, that was why he was on the no-fly list. So, he's suffered a lot personally from all that. Not, he didn't go to jail, thank goodness, but I mean, he paid an arm and a leg to stay out of jail with his legal fees. So it cost him a great deal.
Oh no, without a doubt, actually. But yeah, those are definitely like my biggest criticisms. Because I think honestly, like the trolling, I think I can chalk that up to just being a young man being stupid. To be honest with you, like like Richard Spencer doesn't say a lot of the stuff he said 10 years ago when he was the father of the alt right. So he will mature and he will be more professional, which could be the left's worst nightmare.